Well, I'll just say that it's kind of been the experience of a lifetime to be embraced by this community. It's been great. Let's see, I have a couple like just little things I'll go through and then we'll look at pictures mostly. Let's see, there we go. Well, I'll just say briefly, I'm kind of just a college kid. I was a Hampshire college kid in the 91, and somebody was there who was working on the first Nuestras garden, which was not the first garden in South Holyoke. There were gardens here in the 70s too. And I thought, wow, that looks really cool. If only I could ever do something like that, and little did I know, so I joined the board in 94, and I stayed on for 10 years, I guess, 94 to 2004, in which time I got my Spanish a lot better. I took the notes in Spanish, which is good practice, very good practice. I came on to run the farm, to start and run the farm in 2004, and I did that for 5 years, and then I did a bunch of stuff afterwards. Now I mostly socialize with people from where I go down and hang out or whatever when I get out of my writing cave. But it's been a really great experience for me, and one of the real things I learned is about putting the culture back in agriculture. So that's most of what I'll be talking about today, is what I've been learning about that, the things that I learned from my time in Nuestras about that. These days I mostly work on climate change in agriculture, both the contributions of agriculture to climate change and the potential and current solutions of agriculture to climate change, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'll just say a little bit about why urban agriculture is important in terms of climate change and kind of more broadly. We are reducing some of the emissions from food moving around the country and around the world. We're capturing the urban waste stream, things that would be going into landfills and causing methane that instead get turned into compost, get turned into soil, and eventually into food. In many cases, we're catching water and reducing flooding and reducing the combined sewer overflows that are a big deal here in Holyoke. Every time it rains in Holyoke, the sewers overflow and all the raw sewage dumps into the river. We estimated about 100 times a year. And on the farm, the Nuestras farm, we have 2 of the pipes. So we know really up close. One of them exploded one time. So we really have a good sense of where that sewage is going in town. So as we can catch and store that water in our cities through urban agriculture projects and other green projects, we can reduce that impact as well. We're keeping people healthy and providing income, keeping cultures alive and evolving, and providing a focus for community leadership and self-determination. I feel like one of the most important things that I've seen come out of the Nuestras Raíces gardens is each year they elect coordinators, and that's often people's kind of like gateway drug into leadership. We've had a bunch of people who've come through that and moved their way up into bigger and bigger things. So it's a great way for people who don't think about themselves in that way to suddenly discover themselves as a leader. Anyway, that's great. That's some of why I think urban agriculture is important. The US is not the leader in urban agriculture. It's so much more common throughout Asia. Asia is the world's leader in urban agriculture. And we have a long way to go. They figured out in some of these UN reports I was reading that it would take about 1/3 of the land in a city to grow all of the produce consumed by people there. It's kind of the average figure. And if you look around Holyoke, there's definitely enough lots that we can do that. That's not out of the question. So let's see. So what I want to talk about today is this piece about putting the culture back in agriculture. What I came to understand at Nuestras is that particular crops or varieties of particular crops or varieties of livestock really matter. Like one time we got these Boer goats. They're like a South African goat that's really, really meaty. And everybody says that's the best goat for meat production and stuff. But no one wanted to buy them. Everybody wanted Nubian goats, which are much skinnier. But that's where everybody came from. That's what kind of goats they ate. So it matters. It's not just goat. Maybe once it's cut up, you can't tell. But when you're buying the live goat, which is what people do, to kill it yourself so you know it's the freshest, you got to have the right kind, and you have to have the right kind of eggplant, and you have to have the right kind of peppers, and on and on and on and on. So I began a process of learning about that. And I feel like some of the history that we're going to look at today is a tool that we can use to help people tell the story of where they came from. And in particular, one of the things that's really struck me actually is from this book right here, In the Shadow of Slavery, Africa's Botanical Legacy in the African World. Really, if you're into agricultural history, it's really a great read. And I learned, and we'll see today, how much African influence there has been in agriculture in the Americas. It's really huge. In the crops, in the livestock, in the practices, and in cuisine. It's really not a story that's told enough. Let's see, I've also had the chance to work with some Native communities on eco-cultural restoration, starting to grow the foods again, the kind of projects we were hearing about this morning. How do we help get the healthy food back in people's diets that's going to make them healthy again? And that's part of the story. Working with Nuestras Raíces was a really big place where, again, we have obesity, we have diabetes. The traditional diet in Puerto Rico is loaded with fruits and vegetables, but mangoes are a lot more expensive here and they're not nearly as good in the store. So there's a piece for, like myself, the socially engaged botanist to, you know, have some kind of a contribution to make. And the story that I'll tell here, it shouldn't be a PowerPoint. That's not how you communicate things in this community. It should be a play. It should be a festival, it should be a mural, and if anybody wants to come forward and do that, we can talk, because I got the data, the botanist's data, but it needs to go further to get to where it needs to be. So Nuestras gave me the chance to do this once last year, and I'll take any opportunity to give this talk, so stand ready to be warned about that. And I feel like, you know, part of if you read the food sovereignty platform, the right to culturally appropriate food is one of the core pieces of the platform. And that's sort of what this is about. And I feel like it's a tool for efforts to decolonize the diet as well. So that's a whole bunch of background stuff right there. Let's see. So anyway, these are some of the scenes from the farm. And at the top left there, we're saving the seeds of the ají dulce pepper. And that's sort of the national pepper of Puerto Rico. It's a sweet habanero. It's not the regular pepper species. It's a different species. And it's had a very kind of fascinating history to get to where it is today. And it's become part of our work here in Holyoke. I grow it myself quite a bit. But you have to save seed on it every year because you can't buy it anywhere. And it's tricky because if you save seeds on it, but you were growing other hot peppers, certain but not all hot peppers near it, they'll cross and the next generation will come out spicy, and people do not want spicy sofrito. That is an unacceptable disaster. Right? I mean, we gotta get it right. So anyway, it's just it's been a really interesting journey to get here, and I'll just sort of walk through a little bit of the history of Puerto Rico, because you can tell the whole history of Puerto Rico through food. And I think you can tell the whole history of anywhere food. If you look with food as your lens, and you look far enough back, you get all the marvelous and horrible stories of humanity. And I'll share at the end a few of my tools for doing that. So first, there was a lot of cool stuff on the island when people got there, like cotton and trees that make bowls, and fruits like sea grapes and cocoa plums, and roots to eat like maracas, quena, we say quena, right? And mavi, which is a bark that you make this like slightly intoxicating beverage from that you can buy all over Holyoke at certain times of year, and seafood. So this is what was there. This is the food that was present on the island when people got there. And the first group of crops that came were crops that were originally domesticated in the Amazon. Agriculture was discovered independently in many different places all over the world, and one of those places is the Amazon. And people from this area who would go on to become the Taínos brought these crops north as they discovered and began to settle the islands. And so they brought staple foods, and the staple food really is root crops. So we have sweet potato, and we have cassava and jautia, and the peanut was sort of like the protein and oil staple crop that came. We have all these amazing fruits and vegetables that came, really wonderful things like cashews and guanábanas and papayas and quenepas, which nobody else in the world knows what to do with outside of this region, but quenepas are great. They're like the lychee of the Americas. And these are the ají dulce peppers at the bottom. The top one, okay, great. These are the ají dulce peppers, which are, as far as I know, unique among Capsicum chinense, which is the species that they're part of, in not being very, very, very spicy. I don't know anybody else who grows anything in that family, in that species, that is not amazingly spicy, like Scotch bonnet peppers from Jamaica. That's also Capsicum chinense. Habanero is one as well. And the other really fascinating thing that came is the gourd, the annual gourd, which is used a lot in Puerto Rico today to make musical instruments, guiro. That plant was brought from Africa, where it's wild, across Asia to the Americas 10,000 years ago. That's an amazing thing. As a water bottle, as a musical instrument, as a flotation device for like rafts and fishing, as a birdhouse for pest control, and as food. Really, really amazing story of that plant. It's been all around the world. It was sort of like agriculture before there was agriculture. It's just such a useful and fascinating plant. And then achiote came, which is, it's a food coloring, but it's loaded with beta carotene. It's used as mosquito control, mosquito prevention, which I would definitely really want to do. It was me back in the day. All right, so that's the crops that came, the suite of crops that were brought up from south. And then there were also a set of crops developed in, let's say, southern Mexico and Central America, the Mesoamerican crops that arrived, we think, before colonization. So we have corn, beans, and squash that came from that area. The turkey, which is very tasty as well. A bunch of cool fruits and vegetables like the chayote and the avocado, the capsicum annuum, your standard bell peppers and chili peppers, the mamey zapote, which is like a sweet potato pie that grows on the trees, one of the best fruits in the world, I think, and tomatoes. So we see that each influx of people that arrive do bring a set of foods with them and diversify the diet. Also, culantro came, bracao came, which is like the cilantro of the Americas, which is a really important food crop. Tobacco, coffee, allspice, and vanilla, episode, apazote, or pasote. Pasote. It tastes like kerosene, but it makes beans not give you gas. So very useful, in the diet. Not my favorite personal food, and really good for warming people and for killing worms in people and livestock. So then we have a set of crops that came with the Spanish. And the way I think about this is I'm not happy with the way all that contact went down. We have genocide, we have colonization, we have slavery. It's terrible history. But it's not as though everything was bad. There's some good that came with the exchange of food plants. And Glenn Morris, who's a native guy who's worked with the Woodbine Project in Colorado that I was working on for a while there, he says that it's as though there was an opportunity when these cultures met. And it wasn't realized very well. It was disastrous and terrible, but some of that opportunity still remains. Some of that opportunity to build and enrich these cultures still remains. And some of that interchange is good, and we have to pick through and find the good from the bad. And actually, a great resource about that is 1493 by Charles Mann, who lives here in the Valley. This is the history of basically the early centuries of globalization and all the good and all the bad that went down with that. So it would have been a shame, for example, for Italian food not to have tomatoes. And it would be a shame for the Caribbean not to have coconuts. That doesn't justify everything else that happened, but it is a good thing, and it could have been done way better. And we still have some chances to make things right. So there are some things that came from the Mediterranean, like the pig, which is a very central part of cuisine in Puerto Rico today. Very, very, very central. And meat rabbits and peas, a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables. It's interesting, for example, the lettuce that we grow in Holyoke is black-seeded Simpson. That's the name of the variety, and I know because I ordered it many, many years, from the seed catalogs for us. And the reason that people grow black-seeded Simpson is that unlike most lettuce, you can save seed on it in a tropical environment. So that's just a piece of history to know. It's also really good lettuce. But that's why even here where you can grow any lettuce, everybody wants to grow black-seeded Simpson. Watercress, really big, and if you talk to Hebrews, to like old-timers, we're from the mountains, watercress is a really big food. None of the young folks mostly know what to do with it, and cabbage, which is really valuable because it lasts a long time, it stores well. So you don't have to have fresh greens every day, if there's gonna be a dry season or whatever. I've never farmed in Puerto Rico, I don't know what the challenges are, but cabbage is handy to have around, and cilantro. And if there's one thing, I think maybe even more important than pork, that came from the Mediterranean, it's cilantro. That was a great gift to the world. Then we have a whole bunch of crops that came from Africa. And I had always read, these such and such crops came from Africa, or were brought by enslaved people. And I think, how does that happen? You don't get to pack luggage and stuff, right? But what happened was, and this book really lays this out beautifully, is that farmers on the west coast of Africa were selling provisions for the ships, for the horrible, horrible ships. So they were buying grain and they were buying beans, and actually they were buying banana roots because they were serving banana roots as food. It's like the cheapest food you can get. And when those ships arrived here, they often had some seed left or some banana roots left, and those were bought by people here and used to establish those crops in the Americas. That's really how things like sorghum and African rice and bananas arrived here. Because you can't plant a banana fruit and get bananas. There's no seeds in it. You have to plant the roots, and they were brought as food and kind of happened to be viable here. And the people who knew how to grow those things were African people who were here. Enslaved people were the ones who knew how to grow rice, who knew how to grow bananas, who knew how to, anyway, we'll go on and I can show some more examples here, but so the crops, much of the crops grown today throughout the American tropics are of African origin. Lots of them are. So lots of different kinds of livestock came. Here's Nubian goats, right? Nubians from Africa. We have hair sheep. Sheep in most of Africa don't need wool, and people don't need wool either. So sheep are raised for meat and dairy, and they're woolless sheep, and that's the kinds you find in Puerto Rico and throughout the Caribbean. We have the guinea hen, which sells for like 2 or 3 times the price of a live chicken on the street here in Holyoke. I can tell you, guineas, we call them. Guinea is the word from that period of time for West Africa. So we talk about the guinea, which tastes like turkey. It's really nice meat. Heat-resistant breeds of cattle that were domesticated in Africa are the ones that came and populated the American tropics. The cowpea, or black-eyed peas, is one kind of cowpea. Came and stayed. And African rice. There was a separate, distinct domestication of a different species of rice in West Africa 1,000 or more years ago. And that was the rice that came. And that's the rice that people off the coast of South Carolina grew and grow. And that was the rice that was grown here in the colonies. And it wasn't like people from Spain knew how to grow rice. It was using the knowledge of the people who come from rice-growing cultures. And in fact, there's a lot of stories about women who escaped from slavery and hid grains of rice in their hair and went out to form settlements, like ran off into the Brazilian jungle and formed settlements, growing traditional African crops in African communities in a very different context. So there's a lot, these stories I feel like are important for us to understand. In Puerto Rico, and I don't know about anywhere else outside the Caribbean, bananas are called guineas. So we see this name again, Guinea, from West Africa. And the yams came, true yams, pigeon peas, gandules, that's a really important food, gandules are and what I'll say is that my experience so far, I'm trying to learn the Spanish names for foods in all the different countries, because every country has its own name for bananas and stuff, all these different things. So guineas, I mostly only hear in countries that have a strong African heritage. Like if you go up into the Mexican highlands, they're called plátanos. If you go to Guatemala, if you get off the coast, they're called plátanos, or bananos. But it's in places with a strong African culture that you're guinea. And in places like Guatemala, where my wife is from, they love plantains, but only the really mature, sweet ones. As far as I can tell, and this book backs me up, it's only in places with a strong African cultural heritage that green plantains are cooked to make tostones, which to me, thank you, which to me is how you cook a plantain. So, right, here's some of the fruits and vegetables that came. These chicharros, you'll see all over the Nuestras gardens, like the one down the Finquita garden. Everybody grows chicharros on all of the fence lines. And that is a crop that was domesticated in Africa 1,000 years ago. And that tradition is still alive right here today in Holyoke. It's fascinating. Okra, we say gingambo in Puerto Rican Spanish, like gumbo, which is again an African word coming from West Africa. Let's see. Oh, and coffee came. That was nice. Some crops came from Asia, and they either came, like actually some of these ones here actually came from Asia to Africa a couple of thousand years ago and came via Africa to Puerto Rico, to the Americas. So let's see then some other crops from Asia that were mostly brought by Europeans into the region. The chicken, breadfruit, Asian rice, and the zebu cow, the zebu, which is an important animal in that region. Some great fruits and vegetables, like you wouldn't want to live without mangoes and coconuts, onions, spinach, these are good foods. Sugarcane, which has played a really big role throughout the Caribbean in basically entire islands were totally deforested and used just to grow sugarcane, and kind of still are, and yet also taste good. So mixed bag. A few things came from South America, the potato and the apio. And apio looks like more of an old-timer kind of food to me around here, but you can find it in the markets. It's a really delicious product. So let's look at kind of, to me, the quintessential dish in Puerto Rican culture is arroz con gandules. And this one dish tells the whole story, the whole history of Puerto Rico. So here's what's in it. First, it has ají dulce. So you have to have sofrito to go in your arroz con gandules. You cook it with this sauce. And the sauce is made from ají dulce, which is a Taino crop. And bell peppers and culantro, which came from Mesoamerican colonization. It has onions and garlic that came from Central Asia. It has cilantro and olive oil that came from the Mediterranean. And then you have to mix that with your rice and pigeon peas, both of which came via Africa, having already been there for 1,000 or 2,000 years, let's say. So this one dish that everybody eats in Holyoke every day, or that so many people eat in Holyoke every day, actually tells the whole history of Puerto Rico if we know how to unpack that. And that's why that should be a mural or a play and not me up here with PowerPoint. And then you should all eat arroz con gandules at the end. So just a couple of resources for people. This is a really lovely website that where you can just click on a region and it'll show you the things that were domesticated there, which is cool. It's not complete, and I might quibble about a few things as a plant nerd, but it's a really great resource. Again, I really recommend 1493. It's not a real light read, but it has great history. This one, In the Shadow of Slavery, is really like essential reading on food history and the deep impact that not only the crops and livestock, but the practices that were brought here against their will, but practices that people used. and the incredible influence that we can discover on our food today and on our agricultural traditions today still. And then if you read Spanish, this is Botánica de los Cultivos Tropicales, and it has a really good history and maps in the beginning of all the different regions and what was domesticated in different places and tells us stories and stuff. So with that said, thanks very much. And